Hi, everyone. Welcome to our June Community Appreciation event. I'm really pleased to be here with you today. We've got a really great conversation for you. I wanted to remind everyone that those amazing pictures that we see at the beginning of these events are dogs who are members of the Dog Aging Project Pack, and their humans are members of the Dog Park, which is our online forum for dog pack members. So if you have any interest in being part of that and you're not there yet, send us a note and we'll hook you up through our email. So wanted to remind everybody who's watching live that if you click on the link in the description below this video, you'll be able to go to the Q&A thread on the Dog Park and post questions for Dr. Ruple, our guest today. And if you post questions or comments there, you'll also be entered to give our prize giveaway following this event. This event will also be available on our YouTube channel if you want to share it with friends and family who weren't able to be here today. So thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited for us to talk with Dr. Ruple about the annual follow-up survey. Hi, Dr. Ruple. So I'm going to introduce.
Hi, Amber.
So Dr. Ruple is one of my favorite people on the Dog Aging Project team. Don't tell anyone else. Shh. Every time we have a chance to have a conversation, I always learn something new. So I'm very excited to be here with you today. So for our viewers out there in YouTube land, Dr. Ruple is an associate professor of One Health epidemiology in the Department of Public Health at Purdue University. She's a licensed clinical veterinarian and a diplomat of the American College of Veterinary Preventative Medicine. She obtained her DVM, her MS, and her PhD from Colorado State University, and she's also a member of the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons. She spends her time on the Dog Aging Project, figuring out how we can all age better. And when she's not working on the project, she can be found raising small humans and farming. Also, one of the reasons I always love being in Zoom meetings with Dr. Ruple, because sometimes we get to see the aforementioned small humans and animals.
No guarantees that they won't pop in on screen at some point today.
I hope they do. So we're so glad that you're here today. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I think maybe a good place for us to start is for you to tell our viewers just a little bit about why you got roped into this crazy project. What did you want to learn from this? And why did you want to be part of the Dog Aging Project?
Sure. So I was asked if I would be interested in working on the Dog Aging Project because I have a primary interest in cancer outcomes in dogs. So my PhD work is actually in cancer biology. And so I'm a veterinarian, but I'm also a cancer epidemiologist. And so really that's my primary focus. But clearly, cancer is the disease of aging. And so there's a real link between aging processes and cancer outcomes. And so I was asked if I would like to help with this project. And I jumped on board almost immediately because it's such an amazing opportunity to learn so much information, not just about our dogs, but about humans as well.
And on the project, sort of what are your specific areas of responsibility and expertise?
Yeah, so I wear a lot of hats on the project, and it seems to be kind of I'm evolving along with the project, but my initial role, and one of the really important ones that we're going to be talking about today was in developing the original Health and Life Experience Survey along with that annual follow-up survey. Those surveys were designed using my epidemiology background, but also using kind of a broad net. So trying to capture a lot of information in a short amount of time. So not wanting to put too much workload on our pet parents, but also really wanting to get a really good image of what is happening in our Dog Aging Project dogs, our pack dogs' lives from a day-to-day basis.
So most of our current viewers right now are pack members, which means they've already completed the Health and Life Experience Survey. And most the people are going to be getting their annual follow-up sometime this summer. So we had majority of people join last summer. So do you want to give them a little introduction into what they can expect from the annual follow-up when it shows up in their email inbox?
Yes, I would love to. So our annual follow-up survey is actually one of the most important pieces of the puzzle of how we're going to determine how we all can age better together. And part of this survey is going to look really familiar to everybody that filled it out last year. So that annual follow-up, there's going to be a lot of similar questions. Some of them are even going to be just acknowledging that this is still your address, for instance. So not even that you have to re-answer the questions, but just that you're verifying that, yes, that is correct. That is what I said last year, and it is still correct this year. But we're also going to give everybody the opportunity to let us know about anything that's changed in their dog's lives. So if they've moved, or even if they haven't moved, but they've changed their flooring in their household. I know that a lot of people, like we've all had an interesting last year, and a lot of people were doing a lot of work around their homes because they were home all the time. And so all of those things that have changed in the environment. Have people moved home? Did you have kids that were off at college that have come back home and now your dog has a bigger family that it's living with? Did you adopt another dog? These are the kinds of things that we really want to get information about and really look at what are the things that have stayed the same for every dog in our pack, but also what are the things that have changed for them? Have there been any new medical diagnoses? Were there any issues with getting medical care during the COVID experience? Those types of things. We have also added in 2 new components to the follow-up survey, which will be completely new to every pack member. One of them is about dog eating behaviors. So we're trying to understand a little bit more about the behaviors around food that we see in our dogs. But we're also asking some questions about the dogs and owners' relationship. So we're really looking at those types of relationships and how attached and how people view their attachment to their dogs. So truly trying to get into more of that emotional side of our dog's life experiences.
That is something I've been thinking about a lot because I noticed that my dog is way more attached to me now since we've all been together for a year and a half and we're hardly ever apart. She's super weird if I'm gone for even a short period of time. And,
Right.
um, and I know I'm not alone in that in our Velcro dogs. But I guess this is a good springboard to talk about the importance of longitudinal studies, right? I sort of wish we'd been able to ask everyone about attachment before the pandemic so we could then ask them about it afterwards.
Wouldn't that be great?
That would have been great. But I think I'd love it if you would just talk a little bit about, what's a longitudinal study? Why does it matter? What does that have to do with how you think with your epidemiology brain about the things we're trying to understand?
That's a really great question because I can understand why this might seem confusing, especially for those questions where people are like, wait, I already answered these questions. Why am I having to answer them again? The reason that we do this, but I'm going to actually give you 2 reasons. One is because we're able to track the changes in life experience over time. So we call it temporality. We're able to look at the temporal events in our dog's lives. And so it's not just taking that snapshot view like we did with our baseline health and life experience, right? It's really looking at stays the same and what changes over time, especially as our dogs get older. Or if you had a puppy a year ago, what is your dog like now as a more adult dog? So those changes, they can happen pretty quickly in a dog's life. And so really when we look at just any gap of 12 months in a dog's life, a lot can change in that time period. So that's part of it. But another thing that our annual follow-up surveys allow us to do is to ask those questions that we didn't ask the year before. So things change. We've had a pandemic. We know that our dogs are having behavior changes. And so that was a lot of that's why we prompted this, emotional experience. We wanted to get into that now, which is something that was not at the top of the priority list for that original survey. We did not have the visionary thought to recognize that we were going to have a pandemic experience happen. But also things change in terms of what's available in terms of medical diagnostics and what types of treatments dogs might have available to them. Or if we have something like a natural disaster happen, fires, earthquake, flood, those kinds of things, these are things that can really drastically change life experiences. And perhaps we might even ask some specific questions about those types of experiences that we wouldn't have had the forethought to have asked in the original survey.
What if somebody feels like Nothing's really changed. Nothing happened this year. I mean, except a pandemic. Do they still need to do the annual follow-up?
Absolutely. Anybody that chooses not to follow up with that annual follow up survey, their dog's still a member of the pack. They will always be a member of the pack because they've already become part of us and part of what we're doing. But those gaps in data are actually lost data points to us because we don't know that nothing has changed unless somebody tells us that nothing has changed. So it's almost even more important for those people that feel like, hey, life is status quo. And honestly, promise it won't take that long, especially that second go round, in terms of because we did try to clarify if there were questions that we felt like we hadn't asked clearly enough in the first survey. We have clarified those, so I think that it'll be a faster experience for owners, especially if they haven't had any changes and their dog is living their best dog life and there's not any medical conditions to report. Then I think that it's even more important that they go in and they enter in that information, especially because then it say something does happen to their dog or something does change in their life. We won't know at what point there was that change that really started to occur if we don't have those interim years information available.
You made me think of a couple things I wanted to remind participants of too. So, one is that um, uh, we send this annual follow-up every year, as the name implies. And so some people, like maybe their dog has a health crisis and they email us right away and are like, how can I tell you that this thing happened? We generally don't. The study's designed, and maybe you can clarify this a little bit more, so that we can collect those data every year, but we don't have to collect them at the actual time that health crisis occurred, right?
Correct. That is correct.
Okay. And then I guess the other thing it just made me think about, just sort of wearing my scientist brain for a little bit, is that absence of change is still really important data.
Absolutely. That is absolutely correct.
So I think that's I think for scientists, we think about uh, either way, whether it's a yes answer or a no answer, that's valuable to us. But I think folks who aren't scientists aren't always thinking that way. They always think, oh, we need to have something exciting to have happen here.
That is a really good point. And actually, I think that we'll humanize this as an example rather than giving a dog example. So one of those things that we notice as we age, not that I'm aging, I just had a birthday 2 weeks ago, so it's a bit of a sore subject for me, but we do typically have this really interesting aging experience, which is that it's not linear. It isn't that we age at the exact same rate at every point in our life. Obviously, and I do have youngsters that are growing up, and the change from 10 to 11, 11 to 12, those are really big changes. The changes from 39 to 40, maybe not so much. But
Right.
what does happen is as we experience some of those larger life events, let's say a knee injury or you break a bone, what can actually happen is kind of a cascading effect. And so, not having collected any information in that interim time period, but then catching up at the point that there's a cascading effect, it actually ends up with a real loss of information for us because what it looks like from a data standpoint is everything is fine and then everything is a disaster. But really, it's that everything was fine for quite a long time before things started to go wrong. So you're absolutely right. It is very important that we get that information, especially for those dogs that are doing just fine.
The other thing you touched on that I do want to emphasize also is that this is not as time consuming a survey as the first time you filled out health and life experience, right? I mean,
That
you
is
mentioned that, Dr. Ruple, but I think it's worth repeating because that's a long survey. I know as part of the pilot testing team here, I filled it out about 10 times. So
thank you.
I feel our participants' temporal needs right now.
Yes, absolutely. And especially, I mean, nobody has time, right? Especially right now, I feel like everybody's kind of experiencing time in a different way than they maybe did a year ago. And so we did design this to be as quick and as easy as possible. We're not trying to add to burden for anybody, but we do think it's really valuable information for us. And we know that everybody is really committed to this study.
We have the best participants
We
ever.
really do.
And I guess just speaking of time, I just want to say too that once you get that invitation to fill out the annual follow-up, there's a 40-day window that survey is available in your personal portal. So you have some time, but it's not infinite. And since we're talking about time, one of the things we do at the Dog Aging Project, right, is we're trying to build lifelong relationships with our participants. And it's a little harder because we're, physically separated, we're not together. But I just thought that also as a clinician, you might have some thoughts about, I don't know, your experience having long-term relationships with clients and this sort of long-term research relationship we're trying to build with participants.
Yes. so so I think that the reality is that we are building long-term relationships, and our dog aging pack parents, our team members, our citizen scientists, they are actually the most important part of this study. And they're all providing the voice for these dogs. They know their dogs better than we do. They know their dogs better than their veterinarian does. Like, this is the reality. And so I think that this is the importance, and this is that key that I feel like the survey really helps to open up, is it does allow that opportunity for people to be the voice for their dog. They know what's going on in their dog's life. They know when their dog's not feeling well, even if we can't identify it. There's no symptom. It's just that gut feeling of, I know something is not quite right. So I feel like these kinds of experiences, and especially with this survey, a survey opportunity for people to really put pen to paper and say, here's what's happening in my dog's world. This is actually a really valuable component of this. And it's what makes this study really special for me.
Yeah, I think across our team, it's one of the things that really resonates with us, right? We love dogs, we love this relationship, and we really value that
Absolutely.
relationship between humans and dogs. If you are okay, I'm going to pull in some questions from people watching. Let me see what people want to know.
Our pack members write the best questions too.
I know. It's so true.
They do.
Oh, here's a good one.
Okay.
How much detail will the annual follow-up survey have regarding food, especially like kibble, raw food, homemade food, store-bought? And the follow-up is, what I'm really asking is, what role will diet play in the Dog Aging Project longitudinal study?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. And honestly, it feels like an insider must have written this, because this is one of the areas that we really did expand the annual follow-up survey. So part of the reason that we had a more compressed survey in our original survey, so that baseline survey that everybody did at the very beginning of the
questions
project,
were pretty short.
they were pretty short. And it's because diet is very complicated, and it really does require a lot of questions. And 85% of dogs in the United States are eating a dry kibble diet that's commercially prepared. And so their dogs, their owners are going to write, my dog's still eating the same diet. And it's going to be pretty straightforward. But there's a lot of people that are taking the time to prepare homemade meals, or to serve fresh foods or raw foods, or they're getting specialized diets. Or maybe they're adding in things like turmeric or oils. And those types of things, those questions where they're a little bit more nuanced, that's something that we really have expanded in this year's follow-up survey, so we can really capture some of that nuance on dietary information. Really important. I'm gonna bang this drum for just 1 second. Studying diet in humans is terribly difficult because most of us lie, number one, about what we've eaten, because we didn't have that chocolate yesterday. I definitely didn't have 2 pieces of birthday cake last week.
Not.
Didn't do that. But also we're terrible. We're genuinely terrible at remembering things. And it's not just about like not remembering what you had for breakfast today or what you had for breakfast a month ago, but it's not remembering what you had when you were 5. And the reality is we know that different dietary effects have different impact at different ages. So guess what? Dogs are the perfect model for studying diet, because we typically know exactly what we're feeding them. We measure out the amounts. We know exactly what components are in their diet, not just at the macronutrient level, but really even at that micronutrient level. Like, we can actually measure out exactly how much vitamin D most dogs get out of commercially prepared diets. So this dietary information is actually a really important one. And it's something that I think we all have questions about, especially given some of the news reports that we've seen in the last year. We've seen salmonella outbreaks associated with dog food. We've seen problems with dilated cardiomyopathy, so DCM. So we've got a lot of questions about diet. And so this year's survey really has a lot more questions about diet for those people that are not just feeding a commercially prepared kibble diet. Now, what do I think that will have impact with on long-term health and longevity? The reality is I think that it is associated, but I don't yet know what that association is. And this survey data is exactly what we need in order to discern that.
And, I'll drop a little insider information here too. So, in addition to asking more questions on the annual follow up about diet, um, I believe that we are also preparing a survey that is specifically about diet, that is even going to go into more depth, right?
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Yeah, um, that is awesome. Uh, so let's see, let me pivot just a little bit and draw on some of your other expertise that you bring to the project, Dr.
Sure.
Ruple. Larry P. wants to know if any progress has been made on understanding the incidence and causes of cancer in dogs.
Oh, near and dear to my heart. So, yes, this is really one of the primary outcomes that I am most interested in as a researcher. This is what I study in my day to day, Monday to Friday kind of, well, Sunday to Sunday kind of job. So, so, what we're doing in terms of looking at cancer outcomes is we're actually preparing one of the first, so that first year of data set. So everything that was entered up until the end of December of 2020, we're actually looking at that and looking at what was the prevalence of cancer in our dog aging project pack at the beginning, by the end of 2020. So that's kind of where our first step is. We're just taking a peek and saying, okay, how many of these dogs have already developed cancer?
And
Now, this
yeah,
is again,
they can see that on our data dashboard too. We'll put a link to the dog.
absolutely. Absolutely. So our data dashboard is fantastic because you can go right in and actually look at exactly which cancers were reported. Now we have this reported in two ways. One is where in the body the cancer occurred. So was it in the tumor? Was it a tumor of the skin or was it a tumor inside of an organ? That kind of thing. But then we also ask for what type of cancer. So what was the cellular diagnosis of that cancer? So we've got two different ways that we report that. And this is again where I'm going to come back to this annual follow-up survey. Another reason this is really important is because as cancers develop in dogs, which we expect to see more cancers over time, as our dogs in our pack age, we do expect to see more cancers occur because dogs do typically develop more cancer than humans do. But as that is happening, we're going to be able to go back to this survey data and actually look at what were the components that made that dog different from other dogs in the pack. Why did this dog end up with a cancer outcome when another dog didn't? And it's actually going to be really helpful for us to be able to look at that over time. In terms of development of cancer, well, cancer genesis, so why the cancer is occurring, we're really taking two approaches. One is that we're looking at those environmental impacts, and I'm including diet in that term environment. So like all of those things around the exterior of the dog, all of its life experiences that we're collecting in this survey, but we're also looking at genetics too. We do know that genetics, it is associated with a lot of cancer outcomes. And so for those dogs that we have genomic information on, we'll actually be considering their genomic information. But for dogs that we don't have the genome information, we're going to be relying upon our owners to report what type of breed the dog is. Because in reality, breed is really just a surrogate for genetic information.
Do you envision that someday there will be things like, we test for BRCA in women to look at breast cancer risk? Do we imagine there might be things like diagnostics like that for dogs?
I really do. I really do think that that's something that's going to happen. I think our dog breeders are really going to be the ones that push that work to happen, because a lot of these genomic problems are ones that you can actually breed out of a line. Just to use lay language for that. But basically, by crossbreeding dogs that aren't carriers of a genetic mutation, we might be able to actually breed some of this out and then have just a healthier dog population in general.
I think that would be really exciting to a lot of dog owners. Right.
For me
Um,
too.
we're getting a lot of questions that are coming up about cancer. So I'm just going to sort of stick on this topic for a little bit.
Okay.
Cheryl asks, she says, you mentioned in your introduction that cancer is a disease of aging. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Sure. So it's not that cancer only happens in elderly. But what we do know is that, especially in our dog population, we typically don't see cancers happening in puppies. We typically see cancers happening in our geriatric population. That it is not uniformly true. There's always exceptions to that rule. But some of those big cancers, like osteosarcoma, lymphoma, leukemias, those types of cancer outcomes, we do expect to see in older dogs. And so, by saying that it's a disease of aging, it's really about these accumulated life events that actually help to trigger those cancer occurrences.
And on the same topic, do you have thoughts about this canine cancer vaccine? I don't know anything about this, but
I'm assuming that this is the lymphoma vaccine. And actually, if I could get back to that and maybe answer some questions online, because I'm not sure exactly which vaccine you're talking about. We've got a
okay.
couple of vaccines in development. But basically, I'm going
Yeah.
to give a broad answer to cancer vaccines in a general sense without knowing which one they're asking about. But generally speaking, if we can prime our immune response to actually detect cancer cells, it's a
Mm.
brilliant way to effectively fight cancer. The problem with most cancers is that they arise from our own healthy tissues and our own healthy cells. So it's really difficult to weed out those cells because they look so much like ours, which is why our own body doesn't actually have that defense system against some cancers. But yes, if we can figure out markers on tumor cells that are things that we can actually create an immune response to, and then basically stop cancer before it really starts, absolutely 100% in favor.
Great. Well, that's definitely an area we all want to see progress made for sure.
Definitely.
So, switching gears just a little bit to answer some of these other questions. One of our pack members said that when their dog joined the pack, she wasn't able to upload electronic medical records because her veterinarian didn't use them. If she gets a new vet with digital records, can I sign her up for the veterinary part of the project? Well, it's all veterinary, but can I sign her up in the annual follow up? So I think that that question is really about whether or not they can then start adding electronic medical records if they become available. And I believe there's the opportunity to do that in the annual follow up every year.
I think that's exactly right. I think that everybody will have that opportunity to upload medical records annually. In fact, we encourage you to do so. That's something that you can start doing at any point. And most vets, I think, at this point are kind of making that transition into electronic medical records. So, yeah, if that happens and you have those available, great. Please do share.
And just to emphasize for our pack, though, it is not a requirement of being in the pack that you be able to upload electronic medical records. It's great, but it's not necessary. And
Absolutely.
while some of the studies, the additional studies that we're currently conducting, the genomic study, for example, they are to be eligible, a dog needs to have electronic medical records. That's not true for all of our additional studies. So there will be lots of opportunities throughout the course of your dog's lifetime to be involved in a variety of different aspects of the dog aging project. Let me just look through these questions. Here's a nice general one. We've touched on this a little bit, but maybe just a little bit more in depth. What do you see as this relationship between what we learn about dogs at the Dog Aging Project and human health?
Yes. We'll talk about that. I'm only laughing because so my title when you introduced me is this One Health epidemiologist. And I should have actually said something about that because One Health is one of those terms that I use so frequently that I forget sometimes that people don't know what in the world I'm talking about. But One Health is about this concept that humans, animals, and the environment are inextricably linked and that our health is inextricably linked. And the reason that this is really important to me, this work that we do in dogs, is because I really believe it's not just about improving dog health. It is also about improving human health. And we share this environment, our dogs, more so than any other creatures. I know a lot of people sleep with their dogs in their bed, perhaps, maybe even share their table scraps with them, definitely sharing their water source, right? We're drinking out of the same taps. So we have this incredibly shared environment, but we also have about 650 megabase pairs of shared genetic information. So dogs really share this huge amount of our genetic information, and they're also sharing our environment really intimately. I mean, have you seen those dog ads where they talk about dogs looking like their human owners, and then they've got a dog right next to a human and they really look alike? I mean, we really are very similar species. And so I'm really convinced and fascinated by this fact that we can actually improve the health of all of us by working together and collecting this information in dogs, but really to improve everybody's health.
I love that sort of piggybacks perfectly on one of these on a comment slash question from a participant. And I'm just going to read it to you. So one of my 3 dogs has endless energy, always running ahead of all of us, no matter how long the hike. I believe his energy has contributed to all of our health. So I kind of love that sort of
Love
piggybacks on what
that.
you're saying, right? It's like our dogs make us healthier. At the same time, we're like measuring out their pumpkin in their food or whatever, because we're trying to get healthier too. So I love that we're taking care of each other.
It's
Uh,
really true. And I think that that's actually just a perfect example of how much dogs contribute to our lives, because it is really true. And it's, that we're healthier, we walk more, we get better, we get more exercise. But I think that for the most part, we're also all probably like eating a little better, taking a little bit better care of ourselves in terms of wellness by having our dogs around. And they just make us happier.
except for all those puppuccinos. Is there a question about puppuccinos on the diet survey? There should
There
be.
is not, but there should be.
Whipped cream. Uh, so the follow-up to that question was about where on our surveys do people get to talk about activity levels for dogs?
Oh, we
Um,
do actually have an activity level component to our survey, and it's actually really important because we do expect that activity level to fall off as they age. And obviously, for some dogs, like those really high energy ones, the ones that are always bounding ahead, we're going to see that drop off in energy happen probably a lot later than in other dogs. But again, it's not going to necessarily be linear. But all the more important for you to fill out that annual follow up survey, because we really do need to collect that information over time.
Great. Yeah, because it's like, you, and this is where I think we go back to this idea that the pet parents are the experts on their dogs, right? You're the one that's
Absolutely.
able to say, yeah, she's slowing down a little bit. She definitely is hesitating more before she jumps in the car, that kind of thing.
I absolutely believe that. This is why we really need to capture their voices, because they can really tell us more about their dogs than anybody else can.
I know that there are a few more questions that we will go and answer on the dog park because we don't have time to get to them all. But I think this is probably a good spot to sort of wrap up. Do you have any last things you want to say to our participants?
I do, but you've probably already heard me say it a couple of times today. It is really important for us to get that annual follow-up survey information from you. And if you've already had your survey opened and timed out, don't worry, you're still part of the pack, and we'd love to capture that information from you next year. You will still get invited to the next annual follow-up survey. For those of you that have yet to receive those invitations, they are forthcoming. They're roughly a year after you filled out the originals or after you completed the original survey. But we really are looking forward to learning from you and with you and helping us all to live longer, healthier lives together.
Thank you so
Thank-
much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
It's been great.
Bye.
Thank you. And thanks to all of you for joining us. Just a reminder that if you have additional questions, you can click on the link below and ask them in the Q&A thread in the dog park. And the questions we didn't get a chance to answer with Dr. Ruple, we will get to those, I promise. And you'll also be entered to win the giveaway. Also in the link for the YouTube video there, or in the description there, you'll find a link to an article, Why Dogs May Live Longer in the Future, which might be really of interest to you. And I want to shout out to our collaborators at Purdue University, where Dr. Ruple is an associate professor. We're really grateful to them for all the collaboration that they've done to make both this event and the Dog Aging Project happen. Let's see, a couple more announcements. I just wanted to give you a couple of updates. For those of you who are frequent flyers on the dog park, Eric Lint, the dog father of the dog park, is going to be unveiling a new feature that involves sort of badges and ranks, and it sounds super fun. And I know I'm going to go and check it out as soon as we get done here. Hopefully it will be a fun way to sort of recognize people who are the most interactive on the dog park and help us build relationships with each other. We're looking forward to that. And we need your feedback on whether you think any of those features are fun or terrible or nah. We want to hear from you for sure. We hope you'll consider sharing this video with friends and family, and also the short video that we have describing the project, which I'm sure you have all seen. We'll throw it in the dog park again, because we are always welcoming new dogs to the Dog Aging Project. We love them all. We want them all. We want to know your stories for sure. And we had a few questions about updates on where things were at. I thought I would throw a few numbers at you. Again, this makes my scientist soul happy. We have had, as of this week, 30,850 people join the Dog Aging Project pack. Woo, it's amazing. And just over half of those, 15,656, have been able to upload electronic medical records. So also, while that's not a requirement of being part of this project, it is a wealth of information that makes our research team really excited. We have just invited about a little over 700 folks to complete the annual follow-up survey. And so far, 658 of those folks have filled out their annual follow-up. So yay, your invitation will be coming on the annual anniversary of the day that your dog became a member of the pack. Finally, just a couple of little updates about our genomics study. We have sent 1,172 DNA swabs to the lab, and we are eagerly awaiting results for those. So that's very exciting. And if you recall from other conversations about this portion of the study, we're looking to sequence the genomes of 10,000 members of the pack. So, so we're getting there. So that's awesome. And with that, I just want to thank everyone one more time for joining us today. It was such a great conversation with Dr. Ruple. Huge thanks to her for joining us today. And don't forget to enter the giveaway over on the dog park. Thanks, everyone.